would know what an important part Shiraz plays for us. So more than a third is Shiraz, and it will probably stay like that. It will definitely stay like that. The
So
second
Dirk,
most
why,
planted red.
maybe, sorry to interrupt you, but why is Shiraz so important to us?
Well, I must say the Bureau family, when they bought the property in 1989, they had incredible foresight because they decided to plant Shiraz back then. And back then, there wasn't that much Shiraz actually planted in South Africa as it is now. But I think what really convinced them was the decomposed granite soils and the slopes that we have on Saxenburg. And I must say, tasting, and Vincent and I tasted through all the 2020s last week, all the Syrahs, and it is just it just works. It really works. And I think it's the combination of the exposures that we have, the slopes that we have, with especially the decomposed granite. And I think decomposed granite gives you a really dense, intense tannin structure, which is great for the Syrah. But then coupled with cooler exposures, you get beautiful perfume and beautiful pepper and spice on the Syrahs, which I think really makes for an incredible wine.
And what other varieties do we have? Sorry, now you can carry on after I interrupted you.
So the second most planted red variety is Cabernet Sauvignon. So that's another quite a dominant variety on Saxenburg, and it's planted more on the west-facing slopes, so the warmer slopes, and more at the bottom, so where we've got deeper clay-rich soils to give the structure to the Cabernet. And then we've got a little bit of Cabernet Franc, a little bit of Malbec, but really in smaller quantities, and still a bit of Merlot as well. But then on the whites, by far the dominant cultivar is Sauvignon Blanc. So we've got about 10 hectares of Sauvignon Blanc planted. The Sauvignon is planted obviously on the cooler slopes, so it's planted on the south and southwest facing slopes and higher up. So we've got some incredible vineyards that were our oldest block of Sauvignon Blanc was planted in 1993, and it's still producing phenomenal wine. I mean, it's getting into its stride now, I think, and it's exciting to see what that block does. And it sits right at the top, so it's at about 270 meters elevation. So it's really quite a cool site. It's actually phenomenal in harvest. When I leave the winery, I walk out of the winery, it's not too cold. And as soon as I get to the top in that Sauvignon Blanc vineyard, it's like you have to put a jersey on. It's like it's freezing cold. So that just really shows you how
benefit to Sauvignon Blanc, right?
Exactly. And I think that's why we produce a Sauvignon Blanc that has lovely tropical flavors, but also that beautiful green melon and kiwi and that beautiful minerality and freshness that we get on our Sauvignon Blanc. And that's really, it's all down to the site. And then other varieties, Chardonnay is also very, very important for us. And then we've got some Chenin Blanc that goes into our Guinea fowl white.
Well, honestly, I think if anybody knows me well, Chardonnay is the most important variety that we have, my most favorite as well. So we've spoken about what we have planted and why they planted, and also, you know, where we kind of what are we doing in the vineyards at the moment to kind of improve things, to go forward, move forward, manage them, etc. I mean, that's one of the most important things really is how to manage the vineyards. So maybe you can just give us a little bit of extra insight into that.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Managing vineyards is obviously crucial. As you said earlier, you can make bad wine from great grapes, but you can't make good wine from bad grapes. And I think the one thing that is for me really the most important thing when you look at a vineyard is to decide or to know where the grapes are destined to go. So for what wine do I want to make out of this? And I think it's really to know your end goal is that's the starting point, and everything comes off of that. So we've really put in a lot of effort into the vineyards, and like I've said, we're in the middle of a bit of a replanting program. So we've planted a new block of Cabernet was planted about 3 years ago. We've got a new block of Shiraz in. There's another block of Cabernet coming quite soon, and then some more Shiraz and some more Chardonnay, which you would be very excited about. So firstly, in vineyard management, it's selecting the right sites. It's really about picking the sites on the farm that suits certain cultivars the best, and then by getting the best plant material and the best rootstocks for that specific soil, that specific elevation, that specific aspect. So that's the first thing. Without that, I mean, you can forget about anything else. It's an uphill battle if you don't plant the right things on the right spots. But once you've got that done, then it's really fine tuning. And the biggest thing when you look at a vineyard is really, it's all about balance, as it is in wine. I mean, when you taste wine, you can have lovely aromas and beautiful acidity, but you really need balance. That's what really sets the great wines apart, is beautiful balance. And that's the same in a vineyard. You need balance between vegetative growth and reproductive growth. So that's between the leaves and bunches. You need balance in every single thing of the vineyard. And if you don't have that, you really can't make any proper wine out of it.
Of course.
So
sorry, I might have missed it at the very beginning, but how many hectares is Saxenburg, and how many is under vine, and what happens on the rest of the property that isn't under vine? Just to give us maybe a sense of
okay.
The whole vineyard looks like.
Yeah, so we've got just more than 60 hectares planted. So I think it's just around about 62 hectares currently. But the property is almost 200 hectares big. So we've got quite a bit of open space. Some of that will be planted in the future. There's about a 9-hectare stretch of south-facing slope that's fallow at the moment, that's resting, that I'm really, really excited about, to get some Syrah and some Chardonnay in there. But then we've also got some natural vegetation, which I think is always very important. I think, with farming and everything, it can be quite detrimental to nature. So it's important to keep natural vegetation. We've actually got quite a bit of buck, and funnily enough, 2 days ago, I had a mongoose in the winery, which was quite a unique sighting. So it just shows you that nature is still all around, and which is important. It's important to keep some space for them as well.
A mongoose in the winery, sorry?
Yes.
We missed that? Oh my gosh.
A Cape Grey mongoose, yeah.
Oh wow, that's fantastic. Okay,
obviously heard how wonderful the 2020 wines are going to be, so.
So then on the vineyard management side, maybe just go into a little bit more depth about our soils and kind of what makes our soils unique.
So like I said, we've got mostly it's decomposed granite and weathered sandstone. Decomposed granite is by far the most. And what I really love about decomposed granite is, as I said, it gives to Syrah, it gives quite a dense, intense tannin structure, but that's coupled with beautiful elegance, especially in the right vineyards. And we've got a wide range. So there's some decomposed granite blocks where you literally have boulders still in the middle of the vineyard, where there's basically nothing growing around it, and there's just these outcroppings of rocks. And then we've got the lower down you go on the farm, generally the deeper the soil gets, the more fertile it is, sorry, and the more clay-based. So the more structure you have. But then we've got these weathered sandstone pockets, especially in some of our Chardonnay and our Sauvignon Blanc vineyards, which really for me gives lovely yellow fruit, more on the tropical spectrum, which is quite unique, and which I quite like.
And of course, what is the elevation of the entire farm? How high do we go?
So we start off at the winery. We're at about 130 meters above sea level, and then the top part of the highest block is at 300 meters elevation. So that really is quite a wide range. Okay,
and I mean, for some of the people who haven't visited us, and please, everybody, you should after lockdown come and visit us. But the vineyards go up and then just a little bit over the top of the hills. So then most of our vineyards face Cape Town, but then there is a block or two of vineyards that then face the Stellenbosch Valley, right?
Yes, exactly. So that's the block that I'm in at the moment. So Stellenbosch is right behind me. That's towards the east. I'm looking at Table Mountain, so I'm not actually looking at all of you. I'm looking at Table Mountain, and and then, but we stretch around the Polka Dry Hills. So it's all the way from south facing or south, and then southeast facing, and then all the way around to north facing. This block behind me is north facing, and it's quite incredible the difference from this block then to the Syrah that's planted on the southeast facing sides. We've got much more elegance on the southeast facing side, much more pepper, lovely red fruit, and on this side it's quite intense and quite dark, much more Shiraz in style as opposed to Syrah.
Aha. Okay. And then with regards to vineyard management and our footprint, I guess, integrity and sustainability, our certification that we have, how important is that to you personally? Obviously, I'm assuming it's extremely important if you're part of us, but as a winemaker in general, and just like what does it mean as well to the end consumer with what they're buying?
Well, I think it's crucial, really. I think we fortunately as an industry has come a long way into realizing that we can't just rely, and we shouldn't rely just on chemicals. So there's been a big movement to more holistic or more integrated farming. And I think that's vital. I think if you rely on chemicals, you have to eventually spray because you're causing problems with the one spray, and you just keep it's a never ending cycle. And as soon as you turn back to looking at more natural ways of doing things, so we're planting cover crops to improve soil health, that then eventually you get to a point where you don't need to add as much fertilizer because there's a natural cycle going on. As soon as the soil is healthy, you've got microbes in the soil is aerated. It's just much better for the vineyards, and you don't have to add as much to the soil to get something out of it. The same goes for fungus sprays or any pesticides. We try and look for natural ways to do it first, and then the chemical way is more almost of a last resort, if you will, because at the end of the day we are running it. It is a business, and we need to ensure there's a bit of insurance that you need to take up, but we really strive to do it as naturally as possible. And in drier vintages, you can get away with being very, very natural, but then you do have some vintages that can be a bit tougher with more disease pressure, and then unfortunately, then we have the option of using stuff that we have at our disposal. But we really strive to farm as holistically as possible, and I think that's the way forward for any farm.
I think it's lessons that we've learned in the last few weeks, maybe. Sorry, I'm always interested in cover crops and how we use them. Can you just maybe make a comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So we sow a variety of cover crops. So basically, for those people that don't know, cover crops is what you sow in between the vines, in the row between the vines. And the reason you do it is there's quite a few benefits of doing cover crops. The one is you suppress weeds, so you lessen the need to spray herbicides, and herbicides are quite detrimental to your soil health. So that immediately is a great plus. But then another benefit is you add organic material to the soil. So as soon as winter ends, the cover crop generally dies, and that then starts breaking down, and this adds organic material to the soil, which is obviously very beneficial. The cover crop gives a protective layer to the soil. So as soon as the soil is exposed, the microbes in the soil are very susceptible to changes in temperature. So as soon as the soil is exposed, there's massive heat spikes, and then it cools down again in the evening, and there's a massive spike in the day. So then there's basically your top soil is completely dead. Nothing can survive in it. So as soon as you have a cover crop, there's a layer protecting it that buffers the temperature spikes. It holds back a bit of moisture, and then all of a sudden you have microbes coming to life, and that really improves the soil health incredibly. And that for me is vital.
Okay, that's always so interesting to chat to you and learn new things. I think that's the one thing about wine that I've learned is that you can never stop learning. It's an ongoing
Yeah.
process, and I think I know that a lot of people that are listening are in the industry and do know a lot about wine, but I think for me, it's always seeing it in practice, and if you see it in practice and you realize how much effort and time goes into making that bottle of wine and enjoying, for us to enjoy that glass of wine, people would be amazed, to know that what goes into it. And I saw your video earlier about your harvest report. So you said, how many kilometers did you walk during harvest?
Yeah, so this being my first vintage at Saxenburg, I mean, there's 60 hectares of vineyards to get to know, and yeah, I mean, it might sound easy to each block is a block on its own, but that's really not the case. Some of our blocks I did 6 different pickings on just because they are such a varied soil types and exposures in each block. So in February, just doing samples, tasting the vineyards, because the only way you can really get to know the vineyard is walking up and down the row and seeing how it changes. So in February, I covered more than 280 kilometers. So it's more than 10 Ks a day. So if anyone wants a job, especially now after lockdown, where you walk a lot during working hours, come a winemaker. You're welcome to come and help out and harvest next year. I'll send you out to get some samples.
And just a quick question as well about that, and maybe it might be a bit technical at this stage, but you said you walked the vineyards, and that was to really, I guess, get to know the vineyards. But also, I mean, how is that? How you're tasting the grapes at that stage, so you're actually judging when to pick, etc., on that taste, or how do you know when to start picking?
Well, it's a combination of a few things. So the one is taste. Then I look at the vineyard and you can start seeing when a vineyard gets to the point where it wants to be picked. And then another important thing obviously is we look at the analysis. So physically take samples. You take try and get as good a sample of berries as you can. So you generally walk up and down a few rows. Get the samples, you press the juice out of that, and then you look at the sugar analysis, you look at acid, and you look at pH. And that combined with tasting it and looking at the vineyard really is how you decide. So there's no set rule, and it's a bit of a gut feel, and you get to know your vineyards as well. And it's amazing how quickly the flavor profiles change. So you generally, and might be a bit technical, but you generally, ripening happens, you've got an early ripening phase, and then it gets a bit of a jump in sugar, but it goes into a neutral phase where there's very little flavor, and then it goes into a mature fruit phase where that's full ripe. So what a lot of people, if you don't spend enough time in your vineyards, you can easily pick at that neutral phase, and then that's actually in a lull where you miss a lot of your flavor and a lot of the character from the grapes because you're picking in the neutral phase. So you must either pick early or more at the mature fruit. So it's really important to get to taste as much as you can. So sometimes leading up to a picking, I'll be in the vineyard every single day in one specific vineyard and taste it 5 or 6 days in a row to see that flavor change and to know exactly where to pick it. So it's important. And then you look at weather conditions as well and see, okay, well, there's rain coming in 3 days time. Should we pick it before the rain or after the rain? What's going to be the best? So there's no set rule. There's no recipe for it. It's a lot of gut feel and a lot of just walking and tasting
and knowing what you're looking for, I guess. There was
exactly.
a question from Juliet just a couple of minutes ago, sorry, and it's going back to the cover crops. She would like to just know exactly what cover crops we do plant.
We do. Chantal, I saw you said barley and ryegrass. Yes, that's correct. We can do oats. There's various stuff. You can do lupins. Lupins are actually quite nice because it actually adds nitrogen to the soil as well. You can actually plant radishes, and the radish actually in soils that are quite too compacted. If you plant radishes, it breaks the soil open a bit, and you just leave it there, and it decomposes, and it actually creates pathways into a bit of aeration into the soil. So there's a various there's too many to mention. I quite like using a mix of different cover crops. I just find that's the most natural thing to actually do, is because monoculture is unnatural in a sense. So the more berries you've got, the more insects you attract, the more life there is to the soil. But you also look at the different soil types you have and the problems that you have on that soil, and that's how you decide what cover crop to plant.
And when do you plant them?
Now.
Oh, okay.
So as soon as the first winter rains comes, so we had about 18 mils a week ago and another 2 or 3 mils this week. So it's perfect actually now to start. We're preparing soil and starting to sow some cover crops.
So while we're all at home, not able to get involved, you still very busy there in the vineyards and in the winery.
Yes, very much so. So I must say, I'm very glad if I look at the stories of people running around their house during lockdown and doing marathons with a 100-meter loop around the house. I'm very glad that I've got the luxury of a farm. I must say it is a farm with a lot of hills. So the hills are great for vineyards, but they're not that easy to run up. So, but at least I'm not running around the house.
Exactly. Well done, and thank you very much. I think from all of us, certainly us on the sales team, but I think the whole team at Saxenburg, we appreciate that you are keeping the fires going, so to speak, there at Saxenburg, and giving us some great product to sell in the future. We're looking forward to that.
It's a massive pleasure. I must say, fortunately, I'm one of those lucky few that are extremely passionate, that's really living out their hobby, and I'm able to get a paycheck for doing my hobby every day, which is fantastic.
Louis has one question for you, and he wants to know, how big is your team? I'm assuming that's the cellars or vineyard, maybe vineyard and cellar team.
Okay, so in the cellar, I have six people. They're fantastic. I must say, they're doing a phenomenal job. I've split them up now during lockdown, so that we're not running at a full team, and we can social distance and all that, so we can stay safe. And in the vineyard, we've got a contract team that we mostly use. So we have a few permanent people, but a contract team, and that it's because the work is really seasonal. So we'll have a bigger team. We'll have about 15 or so people pruning. And then those 15 people will probably continue with suckering, getting into the more summer work. And then obviously for harvest, we bring in a bigger team to pick.
Okay, one more question. Now the questions are starting. So Yaku has asked, what do we have any experimental varietals or lesser known varietals that we're experimenting with? I think that's the question.
No, not currently, really. So what I didn't mention, we've got a small bit of Semillon and a little bit of Pinot Noir. So I've got 4 barrels of Pinot Noir, which is actually looking quite nice. And we've got a little bit of Semillon, which we sometimes use for a Sauvignon Semillon blend. So I'm hoping to do that in small scale again this year. But at the moment, we don't have any of the more experimental cultivars. But that is definitely something, as we're looking at replanting and looking at the plan for the next 5, 10, and 20 years, that is definitely something that will be part of the discussion, to see, should we move to maybe some more Mediterranean cultivars in light of climate change and all of that.
Okay. So we have got 1 or 2 more questions, and then we might have to just wrap it up. But I think it might be a little bit early for us to say, but what is expected of the 2020 vintage so far?
Well, I think 2020 really is, it's shaping up to be a fantastic vintage. It's always, one should always be, one is always a little bit hesitant to make too many predictions just straight after vintage, when you're coming off that high of vintage and a bit of too little sleep and all of that. But no, the 2020s are looking fantastic. I think it started off quite slowly. Actually, we had quite mild temperatures in December and January, with not as many heat spikes as we generally have. So we had beautiful acidities to start off with on the whites. That was really fantastic. And then going into the reds, the first part of February was pretty easygoing as well. They were nicely spread out, and really I could pick the days that I wanted to pick exactly, which was very nice. But then February was relatively dry, and it started becoming hotter as the month went on. And then on the 25th of February, we had a 40 degree day, and that's really when everything changed. So after that, coupled with the dry month, the vineyards just flipped, and it was all of a sudden in basically 2 weeks I had to get everything into the winery. We managed to do that, fortunately, but it was definitely, it's like all of a sudden it went from second gear to fifth gear in no time.
I remember because in the beginning you were very like laid back and relaxed about the vintage, and then all of a sudden it was like we didn't see you for a little while. And also,
but I do just sorry, Kerry. On the 2020, I think to look out for on the 2020s is elegance. I think that's really, for me, that's the standout thing about the 2020, especially the reds. There's an incredible amount of elegance on all of the wines. They're beautifully structured, they're dense, they're concentrated, but there's elegance running through all of them, which I think really will set this vintage apart from a lot of others.
Well, that's a really exciting story. Then we'll have to wait in anticipation for those wines. A little bit difficult because it seems like far away till we'll be drinking the 2020 reds. But if we sell enough, I can hear Vincent and Fiona in the background going, "Well, Kerry, if you sell more, we'll be there quicker." Anyway, so but thank you very much. This was our first webinar, and definitely not our last, I don't think. And we, sorry about in the beginning, there was a little bit of techno issues, but I think I will just adjust those for next week. So I'll send out the invitation for next week. Next week we're going to be, our theme for next week is going to be current affairs. So it's really what Dirk is doing currently in the actual cellar. We'll do it from the cellar next week. And then just if you would like to purchase any of the Saxenburg wines, you can either email, direct message us through social media, or obviously through our website, and we'll deliver as soon as we can. And then also this recording, as well as a whole lot of other videos that we've been doing during lockdown, are on our new YouTube channel. So if you look up Saxenburg on YouTube, you'll find us there as well. I think Dirk particularly will be getting some movie contract soon, so anyone who is looking for a lead actor. But thank you very much. We really do appreciate everybody's being here, and we will look forward to seeing you again next week. If I haven't answered any questions, I will then just get back to you personally, or else we can pick them up, because I think there was some about what the impact of the lockdown is, etc. We can maybe start discussing next week some of those other questions. So, but thank you very much, and cheers, and keep enjoying the wines, especially our local South African wines, and of course, in particular, the beautiful Saxenburg wines. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much.